Let's go back to the end of the video where 1 and 2 level business components were compared, and we'll continue. We've been using these methods repeatedly. The load method to load existing information into a business component, combined with the update or delete methods to update or delete data, and the insert method to insert it. But other ways can be used too. We just have to be clear about the differences and use cases. For example, the save method avoids specifying the operation in question. It's more like the confirm button of the transaction. It'll depend on the mode the variable is in, whether it'll try to insert or update data. If it's in insert mode, it'll try to insert, and if it's in update mode, it will try to update. For example, every business component variable defined in an object is in insert mode, and the same happens when new memory space is allocated to it with new. If the variable is loaded with load, it immediately goes into update mode. After performing some operation on it, if it's successful, it'll be in update mode if it was inserted or modified, or it'll be in delete mode if the delete method was applied. Then, in order to know what operation was attempted when this save was found, we must know the context of this variable. With the insert and update methods, however, this is not necessary. Regardless of the mode, we want to insert or update information in the database. This example will make it quite clear. Note that after the load operation, if there's a city tour 2, the variable will load the information from the database and will be in update mode. So the save will want to update. It'll only update the elements that are different. In this case, only city tour name. But what would happen if instead of using the load method, a value was directly assigned to the primary key? It'll depend on the mode of the variable. If it was not in update mode, for example, because it was only defined in the object, and this is the first thing done with it, then the save operation will try to insert a city tour 2. This will fail because of a duplicate primary key. However, if the update method is used instead of the save method, there will be no problem. At first glance, it might seem so, because the city tour variable will have only 2 non-empty elements. The 2 lines we know city tour 2 has are not even there. We might think then that this will make a mess of the database by running the update operation. However, update is a smart operation, and it knows that since the variable is in insert mode, this means that it doesn't have all the data loaded, because if a load operation had been executed, the variable would be in update and not insert mode. So, in the database, it should only change the data actually assigned in the business component and no other. Internally, it loads the data into an auxiliary business component variable, which of course remains in update mode. It changes the data that has been modified in the variable that is in insert mode, in this case, only the city tour name, and then it performs a save operation, since the auxiliary variable is in update mode because it has been loaded. It performs an update. In general, it's not a good practice to work in this way, directly assigning the primary key of the business component variable without performing a load operation. The reason is that if the variable was in update mode because, for example, it had been used before, suppose that it had been loaded with the city tour 5 that only has a header. Then, if we aren't careful, we can leave junk values that come from just that previous use. If we're going to use the assignment, it's strongly recommended that we first ask for new memory space for the variable so that it's clean and in insert mode. The assignment is the only way when the business component is loaded in a data provider, as we'll see below, while studying the insert or update method. This method is used when we don't know if the information we're handling in the business component actually exists in the database. For example, in a procedure, data is received in a business component variable. We have no idea when information will be loaded in the code. However, we do know that the variable will be in insert mode, as it's new to the object, even if it's a parameter. It doesn't receive the mode it was in the calling object. It only receives the value of its elements. So, if we try to make a save, it will only be successful if the primary key of the business component is not in the database. Otherwise, it will fail due to a duplicate key. Since the variable will necessarily be in insert mode, the save operation will try to insert. Therefore, if the object that called the procedure did so to have an update made, we're going to be in trouble. The insert or update method saves us from having to program both possibilities ourselves. That is to say, try to insert, and if that fails because of a duplicate key, and not something else, then try the update. This is exactly what insert or update does. Also, remember that insert, update, delete, and insert or update can be used on the variables of the business component collection type, which is the other case where this last method will be very useful. Here's a variable of business component collection type, which could be loaded based on what a data provider returns or through code in the same program. In this case, the data provider will return a collection of items of the city tour business component type. And we'll want the database to be impacted by what has been done in each business component of the collection. It could be that the first item of the collection corresponds to information to be inserted, in this case, a header and its 2 lines. The second item is information to be changed, for example, only the city tour name of the header. And the last one is also information to be changed. In the example, one line is changed and another one is added. In this case, the operation will not depend on the mode of each business component variable, because that mode will be insert in all cases. Do you see why? For this reason, we cannot run through the collection and save. It will only work well for the first element, the one we want to insert, but it'll fail for the others because it will try to insert and will find a duplicate key. The operation should therefore not depend on the mode of the variable, but on the existence or absence of the primary key in the database. Here, the right method, therefore, is again insert or update. When applied to the collection, it'll be applied to each item. For the first one, it will try to insert and it will succeed. For the second one, it will try to insert, but it will find a duplicate key, so it'll try to update and it will succeed, and the same for the last one. We can ask for the result of the operation, and if it was successful for the entire collection, then we can commit. Otherwise, we can roll back if we don't want some records to be changed but not others. Based on what we've seen here, how would we declare the data provider to load the data as shown? The data provider returns a collection of the city tour business component data type, a collection. It's assumed that city tour ID is not auto-numbered, and that identifier 2 does not exist. Note that there are 3 city tour groups for the 3 items in the collection that will be returned. The first one loads all the header data and the 2 lines. The second one assumes that the insert operation on the first one has already been done. So, for the same city tour, it'll try to change its name. The third one changes the value of the line of ID 1 and adds the line of ID 5. Here, we don't notice the difference because the stored attributes of the attraction level are only those 2. But if the table had more attributes, they would all appear here, or all those we want to give value to. While here, only those we want to change. Of course, there is much more to consider about using business components. We encourage you to keep exploring.